City Candidates Forum, sponsored by Vermont's North Country Chamber of Commerce. I'm Bruce James, the Chamber President and your moderator this evening. We'd like to thank the Goodrich Memorial Library and its director, Catherine Zena-Langleis, for hosting tonight's forum, which is broadcast live on Newport radio station WIKE 103.1 and 1490. We'd like to thank Sonny King and John Rice, who are engineering, along with Dylan Tester, the broadcast for tonight. We'd like to thank them for their help, and tonight's forum is also being recorded for a later broadcast on NEK-TV, and we'd like to thank Todd Toronto for his participation and his staff. The format tonight is a question and answer format, where each panelist will ask a question and give each candidate an opportunity to answer. Candidates will rotate in order to be first to answer the next question. Once all panelists have asked a question, a Newport City resident who is in the audience will have an opportunity to ask the candidates a question. Audience members wishing to ask questions should stand near the microphone stand, and when called on, announce their name and their street address. Only Newport City residents will be allowed to pose questions. No statements will be accepted, only questions. Questions should be precise and not rambling. Each candidate will have up to 2 minutes to answer the question. With 30 seconds remaining, a yellow card will be shown the candidate. When 2 minutes are up, a red card will be shown the candidate, and the candidate will end their conversation. Penny Thomas will serve as the timekeeper, with Pam Lads handling the cards. The forum will end at 8 p.m. tonight. At 7:45, we'll stop the questions and give each candidate up to 1 minute to make a closing statement. Our panelists tonight. Tonight's panelists represent the professional media in Orleans County and Newport City. They are, you can raise your hand and smile for the camera, Christopher Roy from the Newport Daily Express, Robin Smith from the Orleans County Record, and Joseph Gresser from the Chronicle. I will ask questions on behalf of the broadcast media. 3 candidates are running for mayor. They are, in alphabetical order, Paul Manette, Dan Ross, and John Wilson. 4 candidates, 2 of whom are also running for mayor, are running for a seat on the City Council. They are James Merriam, Melissa Pedersen, Dan Ross, and John Wilson. In the mayor's race, the top vote getter will win. In the alderman race, the top 2 vote getters will win. If one person wins at both mayor and council, that person will have an option of which position to accept, and the open slot created will be filled either by appointment from the City Council or by a vote at a special town meeting. Those are the rules of the game. Here we go. I will lead the questioning with the first question, and that we'll start right here with James. How important is the boardwalk to you and the City of Newport, and what should be done with it?
Well, thank you very much, Bruce, and thank you again to everyone for hosting us. The boardwalk is certainly has a central location in the ongoing efforts to turn the city back towards the lake. There's a long and conflicting reasons as to how we ended up with so much of our town turned away from the lake, but I think we're at a point where really so many of our efforts has been recognized by all the different studies, by different city groups, and by, the obvious natural beauty and wonder, and the joy that events like Wednesdays on the waterfront have brought. Of course, there is the question of bringing the boardwalk back under the right conditions so it doesn't become a fiscal burden, and there are, I know, a number of complex issues around that. And I would say that the boardwalk is one piece among many of turning the city back towards the lake, since there are a number of neglected lakefront areas that are also in partially or fully public or could be public areas. So it's certainly one piece. It would not be something to break the bank over, but it's something that we need to continue to pursue and to put a lot of attention to. So thank you for the question.
Thank you, Paul. Would you like me to repeat the question? Okay, thank you.
First, I'd like to thank everyone, and thank you for moderating, and thank everyone for coming out. The boardwalk last spring was important enough at the time that the city was actually going to apply for a grant to repair it. But when the governor came up during his press conference and put everything on the table regarding that property and everything in Newport, we took a back seat applying for the grant because the boardwalk needs $500,000 in repairs. And that is why the city has been reluctant to accept it. It's because of the repair costs. And so the reason that they came up a couple of years ago about it, and when we found out from the engineering costs that were performed by the state of Vermont, the cost, that kind of set it back. But the key aspect to the entire boardwalk, the boardwalk has an impact on the waterfront, but it doesn't really impact the Wednesdays on the waterfront because they can still hold their events, their successful events on the green space. And we had a lease last year where the city leased the space so that it helped the Wednesdays on the waterfront with their event. So having the boardwalk is important, but it's not critical for using that portion of the waterfront.
Thank you, Bob. Melissa, ask you, how important is the boardwalk to you and the city of Newport, and what should be done with it?
Well, thank you again, as everyone else says, thank you for hosting this forum. It's a nice opportunity to get out and speak and take time for each of it. At the risk of sounding like I'm parroting the two people before me, I would say that the boardwalk undisputably is a beautiful asset in the city of Newport. I've spent many hours walking on that boardwalk. However, I think at this point it is at the top priority. I think other things would take precedence over that. We have, it seems like there are other things happening in town. I'm all about, fiduciary responsibility and fiscal responsibility. And to me, I would have to, if a proposal came before the council, I would really need to see what's it going to cost, what condition is it in, we know it needs repaired, who and how is that going to be covered. And then I also want to know, estimating and looking forward, what's the maintenance of the boardwalk going to be? It's been here for a number of years. It's already had a couple of overhauls. So what are we committing to for future maintenance so that either if the council chooses to take it on, they know up ahead what the responsibility, the financial responsibility of the boardwalk is. If money were an issue, I would say, man, take it on.
Thanks, Melissa. Dan?
Well, to go along with the mayor's statements, we had applied for a grant for $500,000 which would repair the boardwalk, and then the city would take it over. We gave that up for better reasons, I believe. And I think the boardwalk has been discussions of keeping the gazebo and eliminating over the water portion, which is the portion that has lots of problems with the ice and the flow in the spring and stuff, and needs constant repair. And there's ways around that, but is the value in doing that a return for the city? I think myself personally, I'd love to see the gazebos always there, but as far as the boardwalk over the water, we have the path around, and you're still looking out over the lake and seeing the same thing.
Thank you, Dan. John?
First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for being here tonight. We've heard a lot about the boardwalk. When I was on the council about 7 years ago, our rep from the state came up to say, we'd like to give you the boardwalk for $1. And then we found out that it was about $600,000 to repair it. So going back and forth with the state, well, they agreed that they would repair it for us, bring it up to standard. The first year, $300,000. The following year, $300,000. Then they came back and said, well, we can't hold a future session in Montpelier subject to what we're doing right now. So if you take the boardwalk, you're on your own. So we thank them for their generosity, that we can't afford it. I know some things have transpired, but part of the deal for us to take the boardwalk was the state had also agreed for 5 years, originally they agreed, to throw in an extra $27,000 a year, was what the state at that time, we're talking 7 years ago, spends to maintain it and keep it in good condition. So who knows what that is now, $35,000 a year? And then they reneged on that. So, if I'm back on the council, anytime the state wants to offer us something, or big grants, we ought to beware, because there's always catches to it. So, it is an important asset, but it's not the most important thing that Newport needs right now.
Thank you, John. The next question will be asked by Christopher Roy from the Newport Daily Express, and we'll start with Paul Manette. Chris?
Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. What is your vision for the vacant lot on Main Street, and should the city purchase that for development?
The vision for the lot on Main Street is to have it redeveloped into either retail on the first floor, offices on the second floor, which as zoning does allow. As far as the city purchasing it, I don't foresee that right now, because as we all know, it's still in the hands of the court in Miami, Florida. Until the receiver decides to market that property, there's not a whole lot we can do with it. But the visions that I have would be to have it maybe not completely built up, but have a couple buildings on the edges with some green space in the middle. Definitely underground parking, because parking is needed downtown, and that is conducive for underground parking. But the one thing that we are, no matter who goes into that lot, I know my conversations with the governor about the lot and the issues, is it's going to take help from the state. We all know that any development outside of Chittenden County, most developers can't get the return on their investment. And so it's going to take some sort of assistance from the state to help redevelop that lot. It's common knowledge, but that is my vision, either have a couple of new buildings with some green space in the middle. But one thing I definitely want to see is underground parking. That would solve a lot of the parking issues.
Thank you, Paul.
So, I have a basic vision for the lot, and that would be to keep it on the taxpayer rolls. I've heard, it's interesting, because but visiting with different people in conversations, this always comes up. And I've heard 3 different proposals out there of what's going to happen to the vacant lot. And I have absolutely no idea if it's fact or fiction. What I do know is that the property is not owned by the city, it's in the hands of the receiver. And what happens to it will be determined by the receiver and within the parameters of our zoning, and so that it's compliant with what we do. I would like to see, again, I agree that we would like to see a parking facility there, underground, so it's not the whole Main Street isn't a parking garage, because that would be particularly attractive. And again, staying on the tax rolls, however that happens, if there is a need for retail in the area, that would be great. There's been talk about hotels, there's been talk of, a lot of different things. Anything that is visually pleasing, that would help us, with the parking issues and stays on the tax rolls, I think is a good way to go and a good vision for the vacant lot.
Thank you. Dan, what are your thoughts?
Well, I've heard stories about what could go there. Again, we don't own the land, the receiver does, and it's a typical situation where if somebody wants to put a commercial establishment in the hole, they're going to return on their money. They're not just going to step in and spend a lot of money to build something. I think we have to be on top of what the receivership's going to do. We have to make sure that our zoning is in place and clear, which I think it is, so that when somebody does come in to develop, they're not going to go through a lot of hoops to get their project underway. One of the projects that I heard about that really scares me is turning it into another state office building and them selling the other one. So I think we would go from a hole to a white elephant, because I look at the Career Center, which cost $18 million to renovate. And I'm thinking, how much is the state office building going to cost to renovate and turn into a hotel? And where does that money come from? So I think we have to be very careful at what we look for what we call the hole. And one of the problems I have with the hole, it overtakes everything else in the city. What about the hill over at Wagner? just as important to the city as a whole. So sometimes I think we have to be careful about tunnel vision and realize there's other things going on in our city that we should be looking into to take care of.
Thank you. John, what do you think?
Easy, the receiver owns the hole right now, it's in his hands. Should we buy it? The second the city buys it, that's no longer, we are drawing tax money off that, even though it's an empty hole, we're drawing the tax money. I think we'd be very careful not wanting to lose that. And with it, we've all heard the rumor of the state proposal coming in there. What good deal is that? We lose tax revenue on it. We need to continue to have revenue coming in, or our taxes are just going to continue to go up and up and up, and we don't need that. Vision, yeah, we have form-based code, which is great. A developer comes in, and all our zoning is in line. We all would like a parking garage underneath, but we won't be controlling that. Whoever owns it owns that piece of property, and as long as they meet our zoning, they should be able to do what they want. Do we need help from the state? Yes. It was not too long ago that the Newberry building was going to be developed. And then what happened? One of the reasons was you couldn't get the tax credits that the state was offering, so we're still sitting here now with an empty building. At least we're drawing tax on the building. I mean, it doesn't look good, but we've got to be very careful not to give up what revenue we have coming into the city.
And James, what's your vision for the vacant lot on Main Street?
Well, I was going to say I just have a couple of things to add. We've been over the issue pretty nicely. But I definitely do feel and hear in the voices of everyone along the way, and hearing everyone I talk to, and even see in the faces looking out across this crowd, a lot of frustration, of course, with how these timetables keep slipping, and promises and rumors that are so much as smoke and nothing in particular, and just every good reason for frustration. And it certainly doesn't look good, and it certainly isn't encouraging the way it is. And there's a lot of opportunities for vision or imagination or this, that, and the other thing. And while I do not believe it's, for reasons that were outlined already, it's a prudent move for the city to get involved in direct ownership, since timetables always seem to slip, and I'd rather not be involved in the city getting someone a contract to log the property, because that's kind of the direction it seems to be going. But this is a long process. We're getting tax revenue off of it, but that the city should certainly be involved in the vision for the place, because we should be able to embrace the developer wholeheartedly and have a developer that's receptive to the community, since you don't get very far without regard for a broader community. I'd like to see lots of green. I'd like to see some real services for the folks who stay and live and spend all of their time in downtown Newport, whether that's public or private sector, whether that's renters or new buyers or housing. But it's a diverse block. It's always been a diverse block, and every block in this city has a lot going on and a lot of history and a lot of potential, and that block shouldn't be any different.
Thank you. Our next question is going to come from Robin Smith, representing the Orleans County Record, and Robin will ask her questions, starting with Melissa.
Thank you, folks, for being here. My question is about the police department, and do you envision that the dispatching center will be able to serve the county and in such a way that it isn't a burden on the city taxpayers, which it could be perceived as now and has been discussed at the council table. So can you expand on the role of the dispatching center and its value or not to the city?
So, I believe that dispatching is vitally important to the safety and general well-being of the community. You know, backtracking to when the state decided to shut down the dispatchers here in Derby and then a couple other ones in the state to consolidate it, it has not worked as well as it might for the area. There is, even though there's GPS and all those things, there's still a certain amount of local knowledge that's important. The city does dispatch now, it's just not 24/7. I think that, obviously continuing this dispatching that we're doing, and I do think there is some viability in expanding that dispatching to 24/7 operation. I think it would serve not only Newport well, and I believe that the service is here. It is feasible that the dispatch service could expand to other services in the area. Sometimes safety is vitally important, and minutes count. And not only police or ambulances, fire, all of those things, it's a matter of minutes. It's easy if you've never had to use one of those services to say, the money doesn't matter, we don't want to spend another little bit of money, they can do it out of Williston. But if you're the one in need of service, minutes count. It matters in fires, it matters in emergencies, it matters for police protection. And so I think it does bear further scrutiny just to see about expanding the service and to provide good service to our people.
Thank you, Melissa. Dan?
I've put a lot of thought into this because over the years I've had different relationships with dispatchers in Newport. I waited an hour and a half one time when someone had pulled out a gun and shot a dog in front of me. And this was back before what we have today. I find the people down there now totally professional. And I tell everybody, one of the most important things, especially our fire department, is the amount of time it takes them to get to a fire. Nobody realizes that their homeowner's insurance is based on that time. So if you don't have a service that's getting your fire department to a fire in a timely manner, your insurance rates are going to go up. So there's a benefit to that. At the point we're at now, and the amount of dispatching we're doing, the turnover to 24/7, 7 days a week is not a tremendous amount of hours. And I truly believe if we have a professional service, other towns are going to come on board. And I truly believe that through our legislature, we should be able to force the state to get involved in the cost of running a system like that. Because I don't think the system they're doing now is working. They have a tremendous turnover in personnel. When you have a tremendous service turnover, the quality declines because people are there being trained rather than knowing what to do. So as far as our service, I believe it's totally professional. Is it expensive? Yes. But I believe that we can offset those costs with other towns, and hopefully in the future the state can give a stipend towards it.
Thank you, Dan. John?
Yes, when the state decided to stop the dispatching and move to Williston, Newport stepped up to the plate and we expanded our dispatching so we could take care of our area. Newport is handled well on dispatching. But as long as the state doesn't force these other towns and they continue to get a free ride, why would they want to hook into Newport for what their share of the cost would be? When the chief first explained this, it would have been a great system provided the other 11 towns or so came on board. Only about 2 towns come on board because they're getting it right now still for free. And then the last budget process, we need another dispatcher. Fine. Newport is sucking it. We all talk about our high taxes. We need good dispatching. So, the council has one of 2 choices. We either not going to continue our services, or we're going to hire in somebody in hopes that these other towns will come on board. Our legislatures, not just the council, they're the ones that should be putting pressure on the Montpelier saying, look, You know, we have a good dispatch area here, Coventry or Irishburg, we're not gonna do it for you anymore. You need to hook in with Newport. Then it would become very viable, because our people are good. But we're footing the entire bill. There's maybe 3 other agencies that are using us. But with us, we have probably the best fire department in the area, and as long as they're up there, we dispatch and we get there fast.
Thank you, John. James?
Well, we definitely have an obligation to provide a high quality of service, and it's kind of a question of how high of a quality and how much of an investment do we want to make, considering the situation with the state so far, of course, as you've heard. And I was involved in these conversations at great length and have talked with Chief DeSanto about it at great length. And just the difference in quality for the modest difference in price as things stand right now justify it to me. But that going forward, this, I mean, if nothing else changes, but everything could change. Newport has always been, and I think will always be, a clear hub for this, among other services in even the northern half of the Northeast Kingdom. And I guess I would also throw out that I lived in another Vermont town, actually in Chittenden County, not that long ago, and people aren't happy with quality of service there either. Even one town over from Williston Dispatch doesn't do a good job. But having a viable option, having the real option for real quality, for when it really matters, because this is when it really matters, is not just a Newport issue, it's an all across the state issue. And we do need to talk to our legislators, but we need to get people in other towns to talk to their legislators as well. So,
Thank you. Paul, what are your thoughts?
Well, dispatching is really near and dear to my heart. My mother was a dispatcher for 18 years for the state police back in the 80s, 70s, and 80s. And so local knowledge goes a long ways when it comes to dispatching in this area. Talking with our fire chief, he told me horror stories of Williston dispatching the fire department to the wrong addresses, dispatching Newport town to come to Newport City, and vice versa. And so something needs to be done, and I firmly believe in public safety. We need to have 24-hour dispatching here. In my conversations with the chief he said that there are at least a couple of towns who are waiting for 24-hour dispatch to come on to Newport because they've had issues with services being dispatched to the wrong address, wrong street address. And so I could tell some horror stories about some near misses as far as emergency services. But this is a statewide issue. My fellow mayors, this was one of our platform issues, public safety, and we were strong enough that it's an issue that we're trying to work with the legislature to get them to make changes. It's common knowledge that the state police, they really do not want to dispatch all these emergency services. It's something that they would love to get rid of, and the issue is, as Mr. Wilson stated, the towns who get it for free, get it for free. But the state police really would like to not dispatch for local municipalities. And Newport, recently, we upgraded all of our equipment to the state-of-the-art dispatching equipment. We received a large grant to do that, and so we're ready to go. It's just a matter of having towns sign up, and I know there are some who will once we go to 24-hour dispatch, and that will help cover the cost. But to me, local knowledge is the key thing when it comes to dispatching. Someone who grew up here, knows the area, and knows the streets. And I see the red.
Thanks, Paul. Thank you. Before we go to our next questioner, I will say if you're a Newport resident and if you want to ask a question, stand over here and you'll be following our next questioner. And that questioner is Joseph Grisser from the Chronicle. And Joseph will start his question with Dan Ross.
Well, thanks very much for this question. I'm curious, there's been a lot of talk about plans for economic development in the city, many of them focusing around the broad area of outdoor recreation. How, in your minds, would that work? Is this a question of just providing low-paying hospitality jobs to make people coming from Canada or elsewhere happy, or is there something more to it that will benefit the people of Newport in the long run?
Dan?
Thanks. You know, this is something that people who know me know that I dwell on this. And I'm going to go back to some of the things that have happened in the past. There was a time where the savior for the city of Newport was going to be industrial zones. And we put our tunnel vision on and we focused on our zoning and we focused on that. Now, I hear recreation all the time. Recreation, recreation. Now, most of you probably do not remember when the bike path started. A lovely gentleman, Martin Fisher, back in, I would think, 1989, we received a letter to the Planning Commission. It was about 2 weeks late. And it was announcing the money for bike paths. And Martin said to me, what should we do? And I says, we send it in and see what happens. And we did. We got on the list and we got on the money. I don't know how many years it took to finalize anything, but it took forever. And we have plans now which are moving ahead very quickly. But one of my problems is it cannot be one source. There's a lot of people that like to bike. There's a lot of people that like to hike. There's a lot of people that just want to walk along and amble along the lake. But there has to be other things. There has to be rooms for the people that come here. There has to be something that the families can do. I think you have to do more than just the recreation piece to make everything viable. And don't get me wrong, I'm really big into recreation, and I have letters from citizens that were going to allow us to continue past up around the pond. Of course, they're long gone now. I've always pushed for recreation, but I also believe that we have to have jobs for people.
Thank you, Dan. John Wilson.
I have to agree with Dan. Recreation is important, but it isn't the savior for Newport. Because you can have all the greatest recreation, but if you don't have jobs, you don't have institutions, hotels for them, it's just not going to work. The vision, does everything take time? I believe it took about 7 years while I was on the council to get the bike path really moving forward. And like 3 of those years were tied up with getting permission and paying landowners for using a slice of their lawn. So, yes, we're talking recreation right now, but recreation is not going to save Newport. We got to have jobs to help pay for all this stuff.
Thank you, John. James?
Well, I mean, as my fellows have expressed, we can't count on one savior. We've done that before. A lot of places have done that before. We need to have a diversified economy, but of course, what I think is being missed is that we are looking at opportunities for a recreational economy entirely because it is diversified. Because it does not care about season, because there are opportunities all the way around, and because a recreation economy is a benefit to locals and to people visiting, a draw for people visiting near and far, and creates a wide variety of economic opportunities for entrepreneurs in the Newport area to start up exactly those businesses for services. The great recreational locations in the world and the great ski areas of Vermont or the great beach places didn't spring up overnight. They weren't one person's design. It's creating the opportunity, creating the circumstances that are conducive and with some level of public investment, but mostly just in terms of being welcoming to whoever is coming and whoever wants to be involved. So I think there are some cultural sensitivity issues, maybe some more francophone language acceptance, but it's about creating an atmosphere, and recreation is just one part of that, but it is in and of itself a big step towards a diversified economy.
Thank you. Paul, what do you think?
Recreation is a vital piece of the puzzle. It's one piece of the puzzle in our community. I've seen some of the economic numbers the Kingdom Trails has brought to Burke. They're phenomenal. The number of people who stay has been proven in Stowe. People stay an extra day in Stowe because of their bike path. And with this new project for the Bluffside Farm, that is going to connect our downtown right to the Canadian border, where there's thousands of people over the border who bike. Biking has become so important that an actual engineering firm in Lyndonville was looking for engineers. They didn't go the traditional route of advertising for engineers. They advertised in a bike magazine that was able to attract young engineers to the state of Vermont because of advertising in the bike and because of the recreational opportunities. So I see that in Newport as one of our drawing cards that we can use, with, especially with the lake right here and focusing on the lake and the outdoor recreation economy. That's very, very important in this day and age. Your traditional manufacturing is not going to happen in reality. Most of those are going overseas. You've got to get people who have a new idea, small, maybe work out of your home, then grow into a business. But people, when they look to an area, they actually look for schools, hospital, and recreation, what they can do. And so I think recreation is vital in Newport.
Thank you, Paul. Melissa, what are your thoughts?
Well, you know, history has shown us, if you look back at any community, any organization, any country, you look all the way back, and industry always changes. And, you know, if the industries change, economic drivers change. We often hear, you know, us locally lamenting about what Newport was. And, you know, when Main Street was busy, when this was, you know, there was all these businesses and manufacturers and things. And we're just going through a cycle of history, of industry changing, economic drivers changing. Our job is to say, okay, Newport was great, Newport is great, it has changed, again, it's the evolution of time, and we need to look forward, and we need to grasp onto the opportunities that are in the future for us, and not lament about what has happened in the past. I think the recreation initiative that's going on in this area is one of those pieces of looking forward. Again, you know, any community needs to have you know, multiple things to drive it, but grasping on to the recreational aspect industry, I think, is an important piece in helping to move Newport forward. There's a lot to be done here. It's not like we're going to get 100,000 visitors next year, but we have to build on it. And there's ways to do that. There's creative ways to do that. And I think that it's the right move for Newport to be working to develop that industry.
Thank you, Melissa. It's time for a citizen of and resident of Newport City to ask a question, and you're standing in that position. So why don't you come forward and take the microphone, tell us your name and what your city address is, and ask your question.
Sure. My name is Ann Sherrillo. I'm a Newport resident. I live at 29 Stagecoach Drive.
Thank you.
And my question to you is, because in this time when the full dangers of chemicals like PFOAs are just emerging, how would you determine, when the issue comes up again at City Council, whether or not to take leachate from the dump known to contain PFOAs and process it through our waste management facility when the plant is known not to filter out the PFOAs?
Thank you. John Wilson.
I knew that was going to be your question, Ann. Very hot subject right now. And the council just recently, and they have the right, kiboshed some of that, the petition that the people had signed to go onto the ballot. It's not an answer, but in my world, and twice while I was on the council, we had other non-binding votes, meters, the water tower up here in Derby, or close to Derby. And I truly believe that when the petition came in, it should have been put on the ballot. It's non-binding. And then the council would have, yes, they can make that final decision, but it'd be a lot easier to make a final decision if suddenly 95% of the people that fill the ballot out, or non-binding, said, we do not want to treat leachate. Now, council, you go ahead and make your vote. You work for us. But we didn't have that opportunity. It doesn't stop us from treating the leachate. I understand that. I truly believe in my world that we shouldn't be treating it. The other two towns shouldn't be treating it. Casella should be treating their own stuff and working directly with the state. But the state's got to force that, not us. But I truly believe that we should have had a chance to see how the public felt on that issue.
Thank you, John. James, you're next.
Thank you. Well, there's been certainly a lot of conversation about the topic, going back a while, and there's a lot of misinformation out there. So I would encourage every citizen to educate yourselves, to look at the actual reports that were done about the wastewater treatment plant, to look at the actual reports and the actual standing of the facility down in Coventry, to be right up to date with where things really are, to be up to date with what Casella's proposals are, to be up to date with the status and the quality of the facility that we have as our wastewater treatment plant, and with how the financial arrangement for sharing of services and for using the exceptional facility that was built with really no expense spared and quite a lot of controversy when it was built those years ago down at our wastewater treatment plant. I am a pastor now, but I was in geology before this when I was in undergrad, and one thing that you really don't hear about in all of this conversation is the power of the two very simple but very significant techniques that wastewater treatment plants use, which are more or less decanting and microbial digestion. And they're very, very effective techniques. So with what, of course, mistakes were made in terms of measurements around the waste from, or the discharge from our wastewater plant, but there's been an incredible amount of misinformation, a lot of harassment, a lot of really bad-natured relationship and it's just become really frustrating. So I would encourage all citizens to educate themselves to read the real report, the actual report that was done, and to, like the council, to read that report, take its guidance for what it actually says, and to be more willing to listen to one another. So thank you.
Thank you, James. Paul Burnett.
Well, we've been treating leachate since 2009. Our wastewater treatment facility has been meeting or exceeding state standards since that date. Our plant is fully capable of treating leachate based upon the reports from the state of Vermont and the Environmental Protection Agency. And so that is after the way the whole thing started is we had a group come to the council. They convinced the council not to take leachate until it was proven, the motion was until it was proven safe. So then the council decided to get the input from the state of Vermont. We heard one side, we heard from the experts from the state of Vermont, and so the council voted to take the leachate once again, because in the ones who voted for it, in their minds, it was safe to treat. And one thing that I think people don't understand is we're treating it here. On the Canadian side of the border, it's interesting. Their leach A is actually treated in an open lagoon system, which then drains into the St. Francis River to the St. Lawrence. So we actually have stricter standards in Vermont than over the border. And I was amazed to learn that their leach A doesn't go through wastewater plants. It goes to an open lagoon system, aeration system, which supposedly filters it out and then goes into the river. At least we're treating it, we're meeting the requirements of the state. And the new permit that was issued for Casella, it clearly states in there, they need to find either 2 on-site or 2 off-site ways of treating leachate. And my opinion is, if we can work with Casella and have them pay for updates that are going to be required anyway coming down the pipeline for our wastewater plant. Let us work with Casella and have them pay for a lot of it to alleviate the burden on the taxpayers. Because leachate isn't the only thing. Medical waste is a big thing. And we all excrete medical waste that doesn't get treated by any wastewater plant. And that's a technology that has to be worked on also.
Thanks, Paul. Melissa, where are you in this issue?
Where am I in this issue? Well, first of all, I don't believe the question is whether or not Newport should take leachate or not, because that's not solving the problem of the chemicals. Every single one of us who happily goes to the store and purchases something and drags it back to our house, we get done with it, we dispose of it, we throw it in the garbage. Every single one of us is culpable in this because we buy products that have these chemicals in them. So to me, the question isn't whether Newport should take leachate or not. The question to me is, it's not the question, I feel the responsible approach to council is to recognize that this is an emerging issue, it's an important issue, it's certainly in the forefront now, and the responsible approach is to actively work with Casella, work with the state, to come up with the process that will treat leachate. If it's coming down the road anyway that they have to do it, it's better that we're at the table and we're working towards having the leachate treated, rather than saying, we're not going to take it anymore and it's perfectly okay that it goes someplace else and pollutes somebody else. I'm not a subscriber to not in my backyard.
Thank you, Melissa. Dan Ross, let us know where you are.
I could go on forever about this,
Well, you have 2 minutes.
but I got 2 minutes. So I got a question yesterday. One of my coworkers comes to me, and they have a letter that was written to one of the state agencies that I wrote to delineate plants and different things that were in the wildlife management area. And she says to me, your name is all over this establishment. And I said, yes, it is. And I said, I worked on that plan. I worked on a lot of the documentation for Act 50. I did most of the drawings for the landfill, the first phase that Waste USA did. I walked that whole site numerous times doing water well measurements. And my first thing I did when I was on the council was I didn't want to take the leachate. And I was worried about hot spots in our facility because at the time we injected. We had a big machine that took it down and they put it on Scott's Farm and other places. And my fear was, okay, we're going to have to dewater. Well, now we're dewatering. Again, I voted not to take a leachate, and it had nothing to do with the PFOAs. All right? Everybody tosses that one thing out. And if you look at a report, and I wish I could remember the name, it's a Weston and something out of Waterbury, May 8, 2018, and they talk about this. But they don't, what you don't know is there's items 5 to 12 that are PFBs and different types of things that we don't test for. All right? And if you look at all these things we don't test for in your tables, they're all bold. Why are they bold? Because they exceed the standard. And we don't test for those. And this is one of those things that we do get PFOAs in the lake. And it's one of these things that settles out. And I asked the state lady, do you ever do any sediment testing? Because it builds on itself. For me, it's a statement to the state. Do something for us. If we just sit back and just ignore it, the state's going to say, well, Newport doesn't care. Derby doesn't care. Orleans County doesn't care. And when it comes to any event in this state, we have the least political power there is.
Thank you, Dan. You're almost right. You could talk forever on that subject. Thank you very much. That's our first round of questions. For you radio listeners, you're listening to WIKE Newport. You get our top hour ID up. Let's talk about retail business in downtown Newport. Should the city do what it can to support retail business in downtown? And if so, what are some examples of what the city can do? James?
Well, I mean, As we've seen, we have a number of different generations of retail businesses shown right around Newport, and tastes change, and we can't be running against, there's basically no reason to run against the tide and support something that's fading away. Strip malls were very trendy, very, very trendy. Standalone supermarkets and box stores were very trendy and had their own reasons, and as those motivations fall away, that's no longer what can happen. Of course, an empty downtown doesn't look too good, but it's a reflection of consumer habits. And so what the city can do, what the municipality can do, because we're all the city, we're all contribute with where we shop and what we buy. The city can be encouraging, the city can maintain the quality of service in the areas that it wants to develop, but that's in effect zoning, and we do that. So we can be responsible citizens, I think is what we can primarily do. And the city can be encouraging, the city can be supportive, but the city has obligations to its citizens, and it needs to raise tax revenue to do that. And it doesn't entirely matter what taste, because we are in the business of providing community, providing services to the city and citizens as they exist, not as we wish they would exist.
Thank you, James. Paul, so should the city do what it can to support retail business in downtown? And if so, what are some examples of what the city can do?
Well, one of the big things I think the city is working on, we touched on it earlier, is the outdoor recreation. You have to have, if you can develop that economy, you may get that type of retail to come out, which will help. Because we all know, as James said, retail is changing. Even the big box stores are having a hard time competing with the Amazons of the world. But we are lucky in Newport. We have the pick and shop. That is known all over the state. I was in a meeting recently in Montpelier, and the people said, we go to the pick and shovel all the time, and we especially go in the summer for ice cream. So we are lucky to have that as a retail establishment. But I think helping to support the events that we have, we do. We provided some financial support for the Wednesdays on the waterfront, and we all know last summer that brought in anywhere from, I would say, 700 to 1,000 people every Wednesday. And I know those people were going to the restaurants and to the stores. But retail is going to be a hard thing to crack with the ever-changing shopping habits. And, I think just having a diverse economy will maybe have someone come in with that unique store. Because we all know brick and mortar stores, they're really becoming a thing of the past, which is sad. I have to remember I used to come in down on Friday nights in Newport, and that was a big thing. But that was before online shopping and the internet and point and clicking. So I think just having the diverse economy, and I think looking into the outdoor recreation is one aspect, because people, when they come here, they all, no matter what you do, when you go to an area, you like shopping. And I think one thing we do have, too, in Newport are our restaurants. We have some great restaurants. I know, as an example, I was in the Thai restaurant the other night, there was 4 skiers from JP. So you have to have that unique business, and the city can help by promoting that aspect.
Thank you. Melissa?
Retail in downtown, in any downtown, is a challenge. I think if you travel around and you look at many downtowns, they are primarily restaurants now, with a few scattered retail stores and kind of gifty type of stores and things. And they're usually, connected to kind of a destination place. I learned a little bit about retail in the 2 years that I owned a store on Main Street. And it was interesting consumer habits. It was very common for people to come in my store, pick something up, look at it, and they go, oh, does this company have a website? I'd like to look on the website. And I mean, that was told, that was said to me as a shop owner. So it was always I always thought that was an interesting approach to shopping. And then the other thing you would hear a lot with people, well, the store's never open at night. The stores aren't open at night. And speaking with shop owners who had been there for, 20 plus more years, all of them were open late, at least on that Thursday night or a Friday night. There was the late night in Newport. And, it's not that they were making tons and tons of money and then decided to start, closing earlier because they were going to lose that 42 customers between, 5 and 8. people stop coming. People who own stores know their business. So, again, retail has changed, and I think it's something that we have to recognize and know. And if, we build our economy in other directions, retail, if there is an opportunity, there will be somebody who will see it and take that up, take the chance, take the opportunity to do those things. I would love to have shops, but if you can't expect someone to own a shop and sit there for 15 days with, $200 worth of sales and expect them to be there all the time for it. It's just not the way we shop now.
Dan, can the city help retailers, and if so, how?
I believe, just like everybody said, times have changed. Downtown Newport used to be a mall, basically, had every store, every chain. Over the years, it's not just Newport, Ames stores, Bradley stores, all these big chains have gone out and new chains have taken over and they're doing poorly. The places are doing well, if you go to downtown Littleton or St. Albans, which I hate to use all the time, individuals are starting little specialty shops where people can go in, get things that are unique and things they want. And I think that's what we have to hope for, that when we have the space, these places want smaller space. They don't want a J.J. Newberry's footprint. They want smaller spaces. And we might be able to see those people come in to have a unique product. It would be great for Newport, and it would help with the walking customers that are going to the restaurants and want to look at something else and maybe back to walking Main Street again. As far as the city helping, I think our form-based code helps. They know what they've got to build or what they've got to do to get their permits. I don't know if we can give tax incentives to people, but at some point we have to decide how do we get small businesses to develop downtown Newport.
Thank you. John Wilson.
Yes, what can the city do? First of all, we support all these events that bring people into town. City supports that, it helps the businesses. This is probably gonna step on some toes, but this past winter's been a great example of how are we helping our businesses downtown. We had 10 inches of snow last Tuesday, and the banks are higher now than they've been all winter. I know we have a small crew, and everybody wants to have their stuff paved and plowed first, but we, after last Wednesday, we haven't had any real snow until this past evening. That's when the snow should have been removed off of Main Street, because people, it got so bad that I go down every morning for breakfast, try to park. You have a half a parking spot on each side of the road. That's all you have. If you have your wife, you drop her off somewhere else if you're smart, because you don't pull into the snowbank and smile when she's trying to crawl over. No, that's something that the city could really, I know it's a heck of a job. We've had a rough winter and we've got another month to go. But that's one way we could help our businesses down there. I think we do a good job on our sidewalks. But we have restaurants that open at 6:30 for breakfasts. When the salt plow comes out, or the sand to cover up all the ice at 7:30, 8 o'clock, that hasn't helped the business. So I think the city needs to readjust some of what we do to support keeping this city open so that we can help the businesses.
Thank you, John. Our next question is going to come from Chris Roy from the Newport Daily Express.
Thank you once again, Mr. Moderator. If the Vermont legislature ever approves retail sale of marijuana, should the council refuse the decision not to allow it in the city and allow retail shops, and should there be a limit on those shops?
That's a good question. Currently, the council decided not to allow the retail stores, mainly at the recommendation of the police chief. I think until the state can come up with a good roadside testing And that's been my conversations with some of the law enforcement community, even at one of our mayor coalitions meetings where we're all chatting about it. And the key, I think, is the statewide, the ability to test, have roadside testing is the key. Because if they can do that, just like they test for alcohol, I think that would go a long ways with maybe probably changing my mind as far as that aspect. But I also, part of me feels that if they're gonna have retail marijuana, maybe it should be under the control of the state in like state liquor stores, you know how the state, they basically control the market for that, and that's maybe what should happen there. It's one of those things though, if you read some of the studies in Colorado, legalizing that has had a huge negative impact. There's been increases in emergency room visits in Colorado. There's been increases in the sale of marijuana outside of schools. That's all in studies that they've done in Colorado. But I think one good thing about Vermont is we weren't leading the way like Colorado. We can hopefully learn from the mistake of the others, because my gut tells me it's coming down the pipeline from the state legislature. And I think the governor has changed his mind on it. And so, but the key again with me would be the roadside testing, and to make the concern of the law enforcement community, to appease them and to make sure that they have their tools that they need once it happens.
So Melissa, pot in Newport.
Hot in Newport. Well, I think we already know it's in Newport.
I didn't want to go there.
However, I think this is, at this point, it's an issue with the legislature, and how they deal with this and how it comes forward and whatever legislation law comes out of the state. And then once we know what that is, then I think the council's in a position to make a decision as to what it wants to do. Again, it's very hypothetical at this point because we have no idea what any type of retail law would look like. So it would be, not prudent to say, yes, I would support or no, I wouldn't, because I don't know what I would be supporting or not supporting. I would like to see what comes out of the legislature first.
Thank you, Dan.
Well, this is a tough one. I know a lot of people like marijuana. But one of the things that's happening is there's already been a bill sent into the Senate. There's been a bill sent into the House Senate. And both those bills, when it comes to municipalities, the way they're written now, it's up to the voter. So either a town meeting or a special election, the community gets to vote on whether they'll have a retail establishment or not. I have a gut feeling that our community will vote we want one. So the only other way is if people don't want it, is that we look at our zoning and say, where can we put it that's not going to harm somebody? How far away from a school? How far away from the hospital? How far away from a daycare center? Now, I was looking at a map, and if I made 1,000-foot circles around all the facilities in Newport, the only place left would be up on the Derby Road in the industrial park. And I looked at that and I said, do I want one in the city? And I went up the road. If people know the Derby Road, one side is Newport, one side is Derby. So just beyond Elmwood Dairy and the State Police Barracks is a lovely building up there that's been for sale for years. So if Derby is looking at it the way I look at it, they want to get it away as far from the center of their city. So it could be right on the cusp of Newport if they decided that would be a good place for it. For me, I would rather zone it so it ends up in a place that's isolated. I don't care if people want to buy it, I'll go there. But I don't want it near a school, I don't want it near the hospital, I don't want it near a daycare center, I don't want it near the drug help center over on Union Street. So, just my personal feelings.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate that thought. And John, what are your thoughts?
My first thought was while I was on the council, I pushed hard and we got it into a thing that we're not selling it here in Newport. Because I always believed that if you have a prescription for it, then you can buy it at Rite Aid or the hospitals, pharmacy, stuff like that, not standalone stuff. It's going to be a losing battle because the state is going to legalize it. They're even going beyond, like I said, the police we need something where they have a test. So just like with DUI, we can take the bad people out and fine them, and then they'll drive in their vehicles anyways. But similar to the mayor, I think if the state's going to do this, it ought to be like a state liquor store and let them control the entire sales. We don't need it in our downtown. I mean, while I was on the council, I even got beat up for the vape shop up here on East Main because it's too close to the school that kids can walk by it. Well, I don't see kids running in there, but I guess they're all using it. But I think it's going to happen. We need to support our police and how they can monitor it. And I truly believe that it shouldn't be a standalone shop. It should be under city control. If they're going to force it on us, then you run the show. But sometimes they like to put stuff out there and then all the communities have to react to what they've done. So.
Thank you, John. James.
Well, we're looking for interestingly contrasting answers. Here we go. The irony of this question and these responses coming almost directly after questions about downtown development is dramatic. Because here is an emerging economy, an economy that could be artisanal and direct and in your community and responsive in a reasonable way about a product that is responsibly used by responsible adults and that is less damaging than alcohol. That we have quite a few establishments all up and down Main Street and right near all the schools. The church was in the business of prohibition for a long time, and we made a big mistake in that aspect. To address some of the things that have been brought up beyond that, there's also discussion at the state level of not allowing towns to vote one way out or other at all. And I think it was premature and irresponsible of the council to make the claims that were before. I would encourage some of the others who spoke earlier to look at some different news sources for reflection on the results in Colorado and Washington, and now that quite a lot of states, and emerging in Canada, of course, because it's, to some extent, depending on your political persuasion, is how well or poorly it's gone. And as Mark Twain said, there are lies, there are damn lies, and then there are statistics. I would also like to point to a couple of people who said earlier, calling for perhaps a state monopoly being a wise thing, that the state auditor published a lengthy report that said Vermont would be better served by dissolving the state monopoly on alcohol. So if we are to learn from the past, if we are to learn from these huge mistakes that have been made time and time again, and to respond directly to an emerging market, an emerging recognition of a product that is not completely without harm, but which can be responsibly used by responsible people under responsible supervision, and can be kept out of the hands of children in the same way we keep other things, and vape shop. So, thanks.
Thank you, James. Our next question is going to come from the Orleans County Record and Robin Smith. Robin.
Thanks, everybody. I wanted to ask a question that, it's hard to ask, but I'm going to anyway. We have a very interesting circumstance of people running for two different positions, and it's going to create a circumstance perhaps where we'll have a vacancy after the election, possibly. And so I thought I would pose the question, what do you think about this? And if you're involved in running for two positions, to explain why you made that choice, and it's a good opportunity for other people to respond to it, and also to say why they are running for their position. Thank you.
So Melissa, you're not running for two positions, you're running for one position. And so why are you running for that position?
Well, I think I have, obviously everyone thinks they have something to offer, and I do believe I do. I have, over 20 years of experience serving on public and private boards and councils, and that experience has really instilled in me the responsibility, as I mentioned earlier, of fiduciary responsibility and fiscal responsibility. And I think that can be used very positively on the Newport Council as we try to move Newport forward. And I see moving Newport forward with two approaches. One, that we look inwardly, that we see, we look inwardly to our community. We do the best we can for the people who are already here. There's a lot of people who have been here for a long time, and there's a certain amount of people who have been here for some time. But we have to make this the best place it can be for the people who are here. And we do that by maintaining our infrastructure and our facilities. We do that by supporting events. We do it by making sure people want to live here. And then the second approach is that we look outwardly. We look towards how can we attract business? How can we bring things into Newport through taking advantage and leveraging our relationships with our legislature, with other organizations, with the NDDA, these organizations that do have a large reach. And so if we partner ourselves with those types of organizations and with the legislature and different entities, we can then build and grow our future. So I think it's a two-pronged approach. We look inwardly to take care of the people who are here to make it great, and we look outwardly to leverage opportunities that other organizations and partnerships can give us so that we can grow Newport into a really vibrant place where people really want to be.
Thank you, Melissa. Dan, you are running for 2 positions.
I am. And I'll put it to you this way. My wife and I discussed me running for mayor way back in the beginning. And we've discussed it over a number of years, me running for office. And we like our time, and she likes the time. And she said, you're going to take up a lot of time if you're mayor. And I said, I think I can manage that. But she says, no, I prefer you not. And she said, if you want to run for council again, that would be a better option. So I took my petition, I went around and I got the signatures for the alderman position. And I did well at that. On the chance that she would change her mind, I got a few signatures for mayor. And on the last day to bring them in, I took my petition for alderman and I gave it to her. She signed it and she says, why aren't you running for mayor? I said, I got a petition if you want to sign it. She signed it. I scurried and I had to get another about 15 signatures to complete it. And I turned them both in. Now, people who know me, I've served on boards for a long time. And I never wanted to be chair. Some of the people I've served with, why don't you be chair? No. Because I think being chair takes your voice away. I was secretary for one of the boards. And I was a terrible secretary because I wouldn't let it take my voice away. So rather than taking notes and doing what I was supposed to, I was running my mouth. I think I am good to everybody. I would like to see I think Paul's done a wonderful job over his years, but I have some changes that I'd like to see made. I think, I don't know, I have a little saying here that I wrote down I was going to use later. All right, it's about teamwork. Teamwork, the fuel that allows common people to attain uncommon results. So myself, looking at me being mayor, is looking at the council having more authority than I do and that they know everything.
Thank you,
And
Dan.
then my team.
Thank you. John, you also are running for 2 positions.
Yes, I am.
Okay, is that enough about that? All right.
And I think Paul has done a hell of a good job. I think we need a change in the city. So I went out and I got my petition to run for mayor with a lot of coaching from a lot of people out here. And and my wife wasn't really behind me on that. Do you really want to do this? Because being the mayor, there's a lot more than just sitting there having a meeting. You have all these civic obligations you have to do. We just went through a wonderful reevaluation of the city, and the mayor worked his butt off doing 85 appeals. I mean, it's not just sitting there for the council meeting. But I didn't like some of the stuff I've seen going on here in the last year or so. So I said, I'm gonna take one up. And I didn't want the mayor to be running unopposed. This is a democracy and people ought to have a choice. So at that time, my gut feeling was real down. I'd like to get back on the council. And then when Mr. Johnson said, well, you can run for both. Well, let's be prerogative. I'll take out 2 petitions. No problem getting them signed. Because I'm retired. I go around town all the time, every day. And I listen to what people say. And so many of them said, you got to run. So I'm on for both. If I won both, then nobody really knows which one I'm going to pick.
I've got bets.
Yeah.
Thank you, John. Appreciate your answer. James, why are you running?
Well, so I, of course, served 1 year, ending about a year ago, to fill in after a previous set of electoral kind of unusual occurrences, and to fill out a term, and then elected or chose to run for the 1 year term instead of the 2 year term, and there were 3 slots open at last year's town meeting. And when I found out that I was running against Mr. Dan Ross just down the way, I was, in some ways, it was sad, but it was also sort of encouraging, because as I heard about Dan Ross, and I heard about his experience, and I heard about his patience, and his character, I thought to myself, I'm going to have a hard time voting for myself this time around. And it was nice to see. Nice to see that such a good man won that time. So I too filed my petition at basically the last possible moment, when I heard that Dan Ross was running for mayor, and that another person I have great respect for, Dennis Jeanette, had chosen not to run again. So. For a variety of reasons. So I am running because for the first time in a little while, I feel like I can honestly vote for myself and feel confident that I'm the best person for the job, that the experience I had in this council, that the experience I've had in the municipal government and school government in other towns, that, I mean, as I think through it, I've got about 9 years of board experience also, which doesn't sound like much until you remember that I'm 29 years old. So this is an interesting life choice, but certainly something I have a lot to offer, and an opportunity to be more vocal and be more public and more involved in what I was involved sort of behind the scenes. But now I feel like I know what I'm doing. I feel like I understand the workings of the city, and that the passion remains to help and serve the city.
Paul, you've been there and done that. Why are you doing it again?
Why do it again? Well, I was urged by many residents to run again. They like the job I'm doing. Being mayor has really evolved since I first got elected. It's become, I'd say, 15, 20 hours a week at times, sometimes more, besides your regular full-time paying job. The reason I'm running is there's a lot of things that aren't finished. I'm excited about our approach to the new recreational economy. The city is now finally applying for and being very successful in receiving grant funds to do projects. And just last year alone, we received over $300,000 in grants, which helps the local taxpayer by not having to fund certain things. The rapport I've developed with, I say, my fellow mayors, we've got a great coalition, and we work on statewide issues that actually affect Newport. You may not think so, but it does. The rapport I've developed actually with, I say, the governor, and even our congressional delegation in Washington, D.C. I've got a great rapport with those folks. I can give a good example is when the Thai restaurant, they couldn't obtain their visa to come back into the country. They immediately contacted me. I contacted Representative Marcotte, who got the governor, and then I contacted Leahy's and Welch and all them directly. Within 24 hours, I had responses, and they were working on, because that's a key business for downtown. So it's those connections that really, I think, help, and the long-term connections that will help move Newport forward, because being able to get down to Montpelier and say, well, we really need this in Newport. What can you do? And I have people say, well, we're hearing good things about Newport. Let me see if we can get some more for you. And so I'm just running because I see a real positive outlook for the community, and I see that we're on the move up. We have a lot of irons in the fire as far as numerous grants that we've just recently applied for. And I'm really excited about the Bluffside Farm project, to have that help the economy, because everything ties together.
There you go, Paul. Thank you. Our next question is going to be from Joseph Gresser from the Chronicle. Before Joseph does ask his question, if you are a Newport City resident and you haven't asked a question already, you can stand here and we will get to you after Joseph Gresser. Joe?
This one may be a little in the weeds. I think most of you know that there is a planned $22 million assisted living facility being contemplated for construction over on Lakemont. You may or may not know that the plans are to fund this through a new federal program, the Opportunity Zone Fund program, and I'm wondering whether there is anything that any of you have to say about this program and how else it might be used to the benefit of the city.
Dan?
I understand that they've been to the zoning and they've talked about their project. It's a large article in the Orleans Record. I think it's a wonderful idea. The problems I see with it in our capital budget, St. Lawrence Street has been on the list for a couple of years to have sewer and water. And that sewer and water would connect to a pump station that's down in the development just beyond the industrial park. So my understanding is that this project would have to dump into that. So I think there has to be some insight into does the infrastructure that we have today support a project of this magnitude in that area. The zoning has been changed so it'll work for them. So now we have to look at, do we have to invest in our infrastructure for this to happen? And do we neglect our neighborhood, which has been there for I don't know how many years, and put them back on the waiting list? So I think there's a few items that we have to look at concerned with that project.
Thank you, Dan. John?
No, Dan has some good points, especially with Lakemont, and that was going to be a project to bring the lines down on for their street. Hook just new one up. Do I think the development is needed? Yes, I do. I think it's a good idea, because there are some people on Lakemont that really don't want to hook up to anything. They're quite happy with what they've got. So we'll spend the money, put the infrastructure in there for them. Can't force them, I don't believe, to hook up to it, but the offer is there. They can pay the hookup charges. But do I think the development is good? Yes, I do. But I'm not privy to some of the council meetings and these meetings. I'm relying on the reliability and the honesty of our newspapers to tell us what we should, what little bit they're going to let us know.
Thank you, John. James, your turn.
I know that we have an excellent team in the administration department for the city in terms of the increase in the number of grants, especially that have been applied for, and the grants that have been successfully applied for. And I think that's wonderful and a critical part of enriching and developing the city, of creating some of the recreation and even industrial and even upgrades that are so important to the furthering of the city. Of course, I also come from the direction of working in a not-for-profit that is only minimally dependent on grants. But of course, my wife is the director of a nonprofit that's almost entirely dependent on grants, and that's not a good way to provide a service. So, of course, the federal government and other areas are recognizing this area, this part of the world more and more as a place where development and grant money are appropriate, and it's something we should pursue, but we really are masters of our own destiny and suppliers of our own services, and we have to take it in a responsible way. I think the Lakefront development fills in a hole in the city in a very real way, and would provide an incredible opportunity to bring a bunch of people who could be beautifully served by this community into this community. It's a wonderful place to retire. It's a wonderful place to just be and to walk and to enjoy. It's a beautiful neighborhood. I live about half a mile from there. It's a beautiful place just to be. And I hope the city can contribute without an undue burden, and I hope there are many steps along their road, and I hope they are successful into creating this opportunity that contributes so much to the city.
Thank you, James. Paul, where do you fall on this issue?
Part of the question was opportunity zone, correct? Okay. Well, the project is a wonderful project, and they are taking advantage of the new designated opportunity zone. I remember when I was contacted, along with the city manager, by Ed Grady from the governor's office about would Newport like to be part of the opportunity zone. This is something that was established by the federal government in the tax code that allows for people to invest in various communities to save on paying full capital gains. So it's a great opportunity for people to raise funds for projects and economic development. And so when it was approached, when Vermont was creating those zones, they had 25 locations. So they chose Newport, St. Johnsbury, and part of Lindenville for this area. So the project for the assisted living is a wonderful idea. It's been talked about for years that we needed an assisted living facility in Newport. I know the way that she is structuring it. Some would be subsidized, others you would buy, like if I retired and I wanted a place to go, I could buy into it and things like that. So I think it's a great project. It's going to help our grand list grow that we need. It's in a great, ideal location. You think about the assisted living facility, it's close to the hospital, the VNA, who does a lot of work with the elderly, they're right there. It's close to downtown, and public routes, and so I think it's a win-win, and I really am pleased that she's taken advantage of the opportunity zone to raise the capital, because it's the type of project that sometimes raising the funds through your normal banks isn't as easy, and with this opportunity zone, you'll be able to get potential investors from around the country. And the reason why the tax department, the federal government set it up is there's billions of dollars sitting there that could be used for potential investment, where people can then invest in these projects and then not have to pay all the capital gains, which is really good for local economies where these zones have been created.
Thank you, Paul. Melissa, what are your thoughts on this?
I think it's a positive thing that Newport, is an opportunity zone. I can be absolutely honest and say that I don't know the detail of it, other than, basically what Paul said about the tax abatement for investors. But if it's an opportunity for outside money to invest into our local community, and I think that's a positive thing, and I would assume that oversight would come with that. The assisted living facility, I believe it's a need. It's, again, like we all said, it's in a good location. It's next to the hospital, the VNA. It's not smack in the middle of downtown, but it's close enough for rural things. So I don't think there's really a lot of negative to say about it, except that, infrastructure certainly would need to be looked at very closely. And how can Newport deal with the fact that it would probably have come onto the system?
Thank you. Thank you. Our next question will come from a Newport City resident. Are you that?
I am that.
What's your name and where do you live?
My name is Christine Russell. I live at 99 Penny Lane, which is down off the Glen Road. A lot of people don't know it exists. There are only 4 houses there. And I'm going to just kind of read it off my phone so I don't lose my thoughts. So my children and many children that we know participate in the Parks and Rec summer program and the out-of-school camps until there were no more out-of-school camps. We lost our location for the indoor camps, so the senior center and the gateway. So What I'm wondering is what your thoughts are around having a dedicated space for the rec department to have the out-of-school camps. So, weeks like next week where the children don't have school, and essentially before they would have them any time that school was out for whatever reason. So what do you think about having a dedicated space, and where do you propose that would be if you think that we should have one?
John Wilson, you're up.
First of all, I would think that if the rec department has a need for that space, then the rec department needs to put a plan together and bring it to the council first. It should come from up, not us telling them, okay, rec department, this is what you're going to do. They have their little area, and if there's a need, then they should bring it to the council and let the council, because right now, we're all uninformed on any of the procedure. So I would say that the rec department would have to bring it to the council first, and then that's how we start if we need that.
Thank you, John. James?
Well, of course, support for the rec department and all that it does. Of course, of the departments, it always seems to be the one that gets shortchanged. And I will say that I don't know all the details of specifically what you're talking about, but we've had a lot of proposals and a lot of suggestions and a lot of studies of building standalone facilities to support one project or another, and it never seems to make financial sense. I don't know how we ended up losing that space. I don't know why some of the other underutilized spaces can't be worked through. I don't know if it's a lack of political will. I don't know what's going on, but there are so many underutilized spaces. There are so many opportunities, and building another potentially soon to be underutilized space on the rec department's dime when they have so much that they're trying to do and being so efficient with money, it just needs to be looked at really carefully. But I understand the significance and the magnitude of the loss, and I think we need to be creative. And if that's a new facility, then that could be a potential asset. But that doesn't seem to be the direction that things are going.
Thank you, James. Paul, what are your thoughts?
I don't foresee a new facility that we need to really build. We could utilize the existing gateway or the municipal building. I understand when the program was cut, the programs were cut, it was a decision made by the recreation director looking at finances and numbers. I think if we could develop a better partnership maybe between the city and the school system and share the cost that way, that would go a long way. During school vacations, the school gyms aren't really used either. Maybe it's something that the schools could do also. Generally during vacations, they shut the school right down. And so maybe the rec department could coordinate it, but maybe use the school facility if our facilities aren't available. Be another good partnership. But I know it came down to a financial issue, and the numbers, according to the rec director, weren't there to keep it going, is what we were told as a council at the time. And so, and the council doesn't get down to that level of, micromanaging the department. We kind of leave it up to the department heads and the city manager, to decide what's feasible in their budget, what's not feasible, and things like that. We have a very good rec department. It's recognized all over the state, and if money were no object, sure, if we could fund it, 10 times as much, but, unfortunately, you have to fund essentials. Well, the rec is essential, but you have to fund the fire, the police, and those services. I hate to say it, a higher priority, which is unfortunate. That's why I wish, I keep saying if money were no object, but it is, we're constrained by what we can collect from the taxpayers. So I think if we could maybe work out a partnership with the schools and share that, it may go a long way.
That and buy ice out tickets.
Buy ice out tickets.
Melissa, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, in the interest of transparency and honesty, I can say that I really am not very aware of this issue. So, that being said, it seems that it would make sense, just listening to the conversation that's happened, that it would make sense to work with the recreation department, see what is feasible, and it's an opportunity for collaboration with other organizations. And I think that's about as much as I can say about it.
Okay, thank you. Dan?
I guess I have to go back to what the mayor says. We've always looked at rec as not being an essential service. But when you have small children and you're looking for things for them to do, it truly is an essential service. So I think the mayor is right. As a council, we're not going to direct the rec department to do a certain thing. Pretty much the city manager and the rec director will look at their budget and see what they have to cut. So I think for you, it would be to talk to the rec director again and see what can we do? You know, how can we get money for this? Because it's essential that we take care of some of these young children that are in the city who don't have opportunity for a lot of the things that they were doing at the program.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you for coming and asking your question. As we approach the 8 o'clock hour where we're going to end our forum tonight, we're going to go with a series of statements from the candidates. And you'll have a minute to tell us anything you want. And I know, Dan, this is the time to come to leach. No. So feel free to make your statement and tell us what you're thinking. James, we'll start with you.
Wonderful. So again, thank you for hosting this event. Thank you for moderating. Thank you to all of our folks in the camera and with time. This has been a really wonderful event, and thank you to my fellow candidates for a very constructive and well-informed conversation. I look forward to our further debates, and I'm going to have to make the choice on voting day. It's going to be a difficult choice, and I'm glad that we have such a variety of candidates. In my 1 year on the council, I received really one comment time and time again: why don't you say more in the council chamber? And I can only offer the assurance that out of the council chamber I was saying a lot. Out of the council chamber, I'm on the street in Newport a lot because of my work, and that is an opportunity that I have to be truly involved and to be truly directly associated with the most vulnerable in the community, most focused on the most vulnerable and on the needs and immediacies of downtown. But what I promise today is that in the council chamber and outside of the council chamber will match. And I will not be quiet.
I'm going to extend this to 2 minutes. You've got 1 minute left.
Oh, there we go. I nicely had it wrapped up, Bruce.
Hey, if you want to stop, it's okay.
So that the inside the council chamber and the outside the council chamber will match more directly to be a public servant as an opportunity that I get through my work, as just a disposition that I have as a person, as a procedural person, as in effect a parliamentarian, as one who will speak up and who will be one for transparency, one for accountability, and one for consistency and enforcement of the council's own rules and of just ethics and decency, one who will be involved all the way around, and one who is so impressed and so delighted for the opportunity to potentially work with our wonderful department heads and really the kind of incredible folks we have working on all levels in city government. It's an honor and a privilege that through the backing and endorsement of the community, you can actually be able to work do this kind of work and really love and serve your city in this way. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, James. Yes, everybody's. No, it's not just that I James.
So inspiring.
Everyone's going to get 2 minutes. So, Paul, 2 minutes on
2 minutes?
Anything you want to say?
Anything I want to say?
How those Red Sox doing? No.
Spring training starts. No, I have really enjoyed being mayor of Newport. I've worked hard. I've never made promises except one: to continue working hard and to always work hard for the best interests of the city. I have never run on one issue. I've run on the issue of trying to help everybody, help the community move forward. I think over my 10 years mayor, I've developed a great working relationship with the state of Vermont, the folks, because I think it's key that the mayor has to keep up with not only local issues, but statewide issues, because they all affect us. Everything from Montpelier does affect every community in the state of Vermont. I've developed that good relationship. I've got a great working relationship with the other mayors in Vermont. Whether you're Newport or Burlington, we have the same issue. We all have the same issues on different levels. It was amazing when we first created this coalition of mayors, and to hear Burlington had the same issues that we do, but on a much larger scale. And I think the mayor of Burlington was surprised that we had the same issues that they have on a much smaller scale. So every community basically has the same issues. I want to continue moving Newport forward. I think we're in a real good crossroad. We're redeveloping our attitude towards the lake. We're looking to the lake without turning our backs to the lake. The proposed project for Gardner Park is a wonderful project. There's been a grant applied for. Haven't heard yet, but that would go a long ways. And I've had a lot of businesses say they would already help support that project, which is the revamp of the playground and the splash park. That will help all ages in the community. That's the first step. The recreational path. I think that will start drawing people into the community from over the border, because there's quite a market over the border, and you may not think of people who ride bicycles and coming back to a community, but when you see that engineering firm in Lindenville advertising in a bike magazine, and they hired engineers because of that, I think that's our way of attracting a lot more youth to the community. Moving forward on the assisted living is great for the seniors. We need to have programs for everybody, and so I look forward to serving another 2 years and continuing to work hard for Newport. That's the only promise I'll make, is I'll just keep working the 15, 20 hours it takes a week.
Thank you, Paul. Melissa, running for council? Go ahead.
For council. I think it's important that one has experience, and though I may not have Newport City Council experience, as I mentioned before, I have an extensive experience sitting on boards and councils. And the very crucial thing that I learned in those years is the importance of looking at any issue with a 360. You have to understand all aspects of anything that comes before you. It's good that people are passionate about things, but it's also good to hear every side of something, because no matter what action you take, it is going to impact almost everyone in one way or another. Sometimes for they benefit one group more than another group, or things, and you have to balance those things out. And so my filter, I always have a filter when I sit on a board or a council, so it helped me in my decision-making process, because I tend to be a thinker, and I like to go from A to B. It's like, for sitting on the council, something that came before me, the first thing I would look at is, what does it do for the city, for the residents of the city? How is this going to affect them? The second thing I would look at is, what is the cost versus the benefit? Is it feasible? Is it something that we can work with, cost versus benefit? And then the other filter would certainly be, will it sustain and support businesses that are already here, and will it help to attract new business to the area? And that would be pretty much my guide in looking at any issue and decision-making that came before the council. I'm a new voice for a council. This is the age of recycling, so that's probably not to my advantage that I'm new and I'm not, coming back. But I think having a new voice would be beneficial. I think I can bring a different look to things, a very studious look to things.
Thank you, Melissa. Dan, you're running for mayor and council. You've got 2 minutes to let us.
2 minutes, I got a minute for each.
Yes, you do.
Okay, so the first thing I want to say is I'd like to see a new bylaw, 6 chickens in every yard. I think that's very important. No. One of the things that I like to see is that I like to see young people coming in and working towards a position and representing the city. For me, I think I'm a good listener. I'm not always agreeable, but I think I'm disagreeable in a nice way. For those that know me. I think what I could bring to the city is I think I get along well. I very much on teamwork. I don't believe in holding the cards close to my heart. I think if you're a team and a council, everyone has the same information to work with. There's no secrets among us. I think everybody that's on this board and anybody that's running knows how to keep the things that are important that don't go out to the public, keep them to themselves. And you have to have that insight in order to make a reasonable judgment on anything that comes to you. You can't make, sometimes I feel like I'm rushed. You know, I give my packet one day and then 2 days later I gotta make a decision. And I've never felt like nothing should be that important that it can't get pushed out to the next meeting. Give people an opportunity to speak, hear from people. I'm one of those, I don't like to argue. So when you have a comment session, it should be a comment and not a question. All right? If we're gonna have questions, I think we should have a question section where you can present questions. Can all questions be answered? Not now.
Thank you very much, Dan. John Wilson, you're running for mayor and council, and you've got 2 minutes to say anything you wish.
The main reason is I'm retired. I have nothing to do all day. And it's easy for me to get out and talk to people and listen to their concerns. And I think over 17 years, I'm approachable, I will listen to their concerns, and I have fought for the people out there that can't pay their water, their sewer, their taxes, and I've really tried to work hard for them. I'd like to throw 2 quick things out. One of them was like an alibi when we were talking of putting infrastructure down on Lakemont. Be aware of whoever sits on the council that 10, 12 years ago we had a sinking fund to fix the Coventry Street, which we kept robbing from for other projects that hasn't been touched. And if you talk to Mr. Bernier, you're talking streets. One of the biggest streets in the city is West Main. When you talk to Tom, he says that entire street's got to be rebuilt, redone, all new infrastructure because it's outdated. Do I have red already?
No.
Oh, and for 9 elections now, 17, I have the experience, and I have time to go to everything, every stinking meeting, but every meeting that there is. And I do, and then I used to let the other council members know this. And for 9 years, or 9 elections, I've stood out in front of City Hall with a little sign saying, please vote for me for Alderman. And in my mind, I had planned, okay, because we work as a team. I have a wife that's the other half of my team. And I was going to hold one, and she was going to hold the other one. But she is undergoing some major surgery on, guess what day? Election day. So you all have to see my little face out there. If you don't know who I am, I guess it's too late. My priority is with my wife on that particular day. So.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give these candidates a big round of applause. I think it's safe to say that whatever direction the city of Newport goes in, they'll be in capable hands from what we've seen tonight. This concludes our Newport City Candidates Forum. We'd like to thank our panelists, Christopher Roy from the Newport Daily Express, Robin Smith from the Orleans County Record, Joseph Gresser from the Chronicle, and candidates Paul Manette, Dan Ross, John Wilson running for mayor, and James Merriam, Melissa Pedersen, Dan Ross, and John Wilson running for alderman. We'd also like to thank the Goodrich Memorial Library for hosting this event, WIKE for broadcasting the forum, NEK-TV for recording the forum, plus our timekeepers, Penny Thomas and Pam Ladd. And we'd like to thank you for attending and listening and watching. An informed voter is the best voter. Please exercise your voting rights on town meeting day, March 5th at the Newport City Municipal Building, starting at 8 a.m. and closing at 7 p.m. On behalf of Vermont's North Country Chamber of Commerce, I'm Bruce James, wishing you all good night, safe travels, be well.
Thank you very much.